Good morning. Good morning. It's 9 o'clock. You're very welcome to this Road Safety Strategy Symposium. My name's James Luckhurst from Project Edward, and it's a great pleasure to have you with us for as much or as little as you wish from what I think promises to be a full and very practical day. I'll be involved with part of it. And I'll be looking forward to introducing a number of other key presenters and contributors, experts to really unpick some of the road safety strategy and see about turning it into local delivery. Now, we're recording the whole event so that you, your colleagues, contacts can revisit the discussions afterwards. So bear that in mind through the sessions. I think what we're planning to do, we will break it up afterwards so that you can come back to any specific session and find that fairly quickly on the Project Edward website. We're going to start with a short strategic opening and explanation of the day, then move into how we turn strategy into local delivery, followed by sessions on using targets and data, safe system perspectives, governance and ownership delivery, post-crash care, enforcement, and finding how it's all paid for and what our next steps should be. So at this point, let me bring in Dan Camsell from Agilysis. Dan, I hope I've given a reasonable overview of what to expect, but you can add whatever you wish to that.
Thanks, James. Great to be here and great to be with you. And thank you very much for all of the work that you've done to make this event a success already. I mean, here we are, 9:01, and there's already nearly 140 colleagues joining us from across the country to participate in today's symposium. And I think, you framed the day really well. There's the launch of the National Road Safety Strategy on the 7th of January has caused quite a buzz. The Project Edward webinar that followed just 2 days later had something like 700 people register for it. And so there's a real desire out there to get into what does this national ambition mean for us in terms of how we go about moving it into local delivery. So today's going to be a great opportunity to discuss that with a range of key leaders from across the country. We're going to have input from the Department for Transport, a range of leading charities and policy advisory groups, as well as police, fire and rescue service, police and crime commissioners, a whole variety of contributors today. So very much looking forward to it. It should be a good day ahead.
Now, what I'd like to say from a practical point of view is I think we would like comments and questions to go into the Q&A. So don't use the chat, use the Q&A, and we will do our best to monitor that throughout the day and bring in where we possibly can your questions and comments to the people who were involved in the discussions. So we'll make it as interactive as possible. So if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment at any point, please use the Q&A function. Keep your question concise. We'll bring in as many as we can during each discussion, and we may also group similar themes together if possible. So look, with that, we're going to start the next session a minute or two ahead of time, Dan. I hope that's all right by you and by everybody who's joining you. So from me, thank you very much for joining us. Let's get started. Over to you, Dan Camsell, for the first session of the day.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. And as I said, we'll see the numbers increasing, I'm sure, because we've got well over 400 people registered for today's symposium. So without further ado, we're going to start to get into our content. So I'm delighted to see that my first set of panelists of the day have joined. And so if Tanya, Susie, Kathy, and Ruth would all like to turn their cameras on, which hopefully you will have the power to do, and then it'd be great. And it will look like I'm not on my own sitting here trying to host an event solo. This first session, we have really tried to sort of bring a bit of a focus on what does it mean to translate this national strategy into local delivery? And then the remainder of the day, I think we'll start to dig into that into considerably more detail. But we thought it would be great to frame the day with a presentation from DFT. So I'm delighted that Kathy Miller is here to join us from DFT and will give us that presentation that will set the frame really for the conversation that follows. And after we've had about 15 minutes or so of presentation from Kathy, then what we're going to do is go into a bit of a panel discussion to talk about, from some of those headlines, what does this mean for us in terms of the nation moving forward to embrace the strategy and start to think about turning it into delivery. So if I get some introductions from my panelists, that would be great. Kathy, I've already mentioned that you're with us, but if you'd like to do a quick introduction of yourself, that would be fantastic.
Hey Dan, and it's really lovely to be here this morning. I'm Kathy Miller. I'm Head of Road Safety at the Department for Transport in London. I've been in this role about a year and a half, but I've been in transport since 2011. I spent a lot of my time in the roads and local space in transport.
Brilliant, thank you. Also joined by Ruth Purdy, OBE from the Road Safety Trust. Ruth, if you'd like to say a few words of introduction for anyone who doesn't know you, which probably won't be that many.
Good morning, Dan. Good morning, everybody else. I'm Ruth Purdy, and I'm the Chief Executive of the Road Safety Trust. And for those who don't know about the work of the Road Safety Trust, we are a grant-giving charity, and over the last 10 years, we've been very fortunate to be able to give out over £13 million to 130 grant applicants. And I'd like to think that we only do what we do because of the collaborations and partnerships and friendships that we have with perhaps many people who are on the call today. So I'm really delighted to be here, Dan.
Brilliant. Great to have you with us, Ruth. Let me also introduce Susie, again, somebody else who needs a little introduction, but and who is also going to be made to work very hard today. I think she's got 2 or 3 sessions or something that she's contributing to. So, Susie, good to have you.
Thanks so much, Dan. So hi, I'm Susie Chum, I'm the Executive Director of the Road Safety Foundation. The Road Safety Foundation is a charity, and we are all about advocating for safe system implementation and also providing tools, methodologies, training, and so on to try and support partners in their delivery. My sort of involvement with safe system goes back about 15 to 20 years. I've written national road safety strategies and developed many projects all about trying to bring forward that delivery.
Great stuff. Thanks, Susie. And our final panelist for this morning has had to step in very late in the day. We were supposed to be joined by Jonathan Passmore from the World Health Organization, who has been looking at injury prevention across Europe for many years and would give us a bit of an international perspective on how this strategy stacks up against others. Unfortunately, he's in the process of moving back to Australia, and complications have overtaken him this morning, so he has not been able to join us. So I have invited Tanya Fosdick, who is Research Director at Agilysis, to join us. So Tanya, do you want to do a quick intro?
Well, you've just said my title. So yeah, I'm Research Director at Agilysis. I've been in road safety for just over 20 years, working on research and analysis to support local authorities, regional organisations, national governments. Like Susie, been working in the safe system arena for a little while now, capacity building and writing strategies. So hopefully I can bring a little bit of perspective of some of the partners that we work with across the UK.
And I suppose I ought to introduce myself as the token male on the panel. It's having recently had International Women's Day, it's great to be a token bloke. So Dan Campsaw, I am chair of Agilysis and have worn a variety of hats in the road safety world over the last couple of decades. Principally, I'm also the chair of the UK's Parliamentary Advisory Council for Transport Safety and a trustee of RoadSafe. Great. Well, I've trailed it already, Kathy, but we said that we'd start the day with an opportunity to hear from the department, from you, about the strategy. So I'm going to hand over to you to give us a bit of a presentation on what the strategy means for us.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everybody. I will try and keep an eye on the time. Do give me a nudge if I'm getting too into it, because I could talk about this till the cows come home. Really, I will just share my slide. Oh, hang on. I will just share my slides. There we go. Hopefully this will work utterly seamlessly. And the slide should come off
something. Yeah.
In a moment.
Great.
Can everyone see that? I've got a presenter view. Can you see a proper view?
Yeah, it's showing beautifully for us.
Even better. Even better. So as you will know, there hasn't been a national road safety strategy for, I think, well over 10 years. And this has been a key priority for our ministers since the 2024 election. Many of you will have heard Lillian Greenwood present, or you will have met her at events, and you will know the strength, the personal commitment that she has as Minister in charge of road safety to this. But it really isn't just her. Heidi Alexander, our Secretary of State, who you may see a bit less. I just wanted to take the opportunity to assure everybody she is absolutely behind this strategy as well. She's been closely involved with it all the way through, and it really is a product of the whole of our political team. Yeah. Move it on. So, really, having not had a strategy for such a long time, it's fantastic to be able to say that the Westminster government is very much back at the table and here with a plan to hopefully both pull together a number of things. I mean, partly it's a call to arms, a call to action, because we are all different parts of the road safety ecosystem, hopefully a safe system, but we all have different roles to play, and it isn't just government and it isn't just local actors. It is genuinely all of us working in partnership. And in the strategy, we have focused particularly on things that only national government can do. So particularly anything to do with the law around licensing or the criminal law. Those are things no one else can do except Westminster. But we really recognise in the strategy that it takes all of us to make this happen. So I wanted to say that first and foremost. So the strategy introduces 2 targets, which are very ambitious, but we think achievable. And those are to reduce the number of people killed or seriously injured on our roads by 65% by 2035. And a second target around child safety to reduce the number of children killed or seriously injured by 70% over that same time period. I think I want to say even more about partnership, and that is just to really, really underline the point that we are relying on others to help us get there. So obviously the devolved governments are a really important part of this story because the targets are, well, I've got Northern Ireland on there, the targets are actually GB wide, and most of road safety and roads is sort of GB with Ireland being separate. But we do have terrifically strong partnership working across the official level, across the governments of all 4 nations, which is really something I celebrate personally. Other partners that are hugely important and hopefully are represented on this call are people from local authorities who have, such an important role to play, police, emergency services, many of you road safety professionals, charities. I mean, the list could go on and on. This is only just a sort of summary of it. So the strategy itself, there are 34 policy measures in the strategy overall, and they are brigaded under 4 broad themes. It is based on the safe system, but we haven't got the 5 pillars. That's not how we've chosen to structure it. So our themes are supporting road users. The second theme is around technology, data and innovation. Then we've got the infrastructure theme, which picks up both the safer roads and safer speeds pillars of the safe system. And lastly, enforcement. So I'll gallop through these. I will try not to take too long, and I'm hoping that many of you have at least glanced through the strategy document, so you will be familiar with much of this already. So under our supporting road users themes, I will say I won't talk through all of these different measures, but just highlight the main ones. And so starting with young and novice drivers, obviously we know that young drivers are disproportionately overrepresented in casualty statistics, and the debate is obviously a really, really impassioned one on this. But the commitment in the strategy is to consult on introducing a minimum learning period for all new drivers. And that is composed of a number of different strands. So that minimum learning period could be just a time period of either 3 or 6 months in between theory and practical test. But we're also consulting on whether we should introduce a structured syllabus to help support learners on that journey. So that could include a required number of hours practice time. It could include a requirement to drive in different driving conditions, different weather conditions, driving at night. So all of that is something we really want to hear people's views on. We should say that ministers look really hard at this, as you would expect, and there were difficult choices. And I think our Secretary of State said on an event not so long ago, it's probably the hardest bit, actually, the strategy. And it was a genuine balancing act between pre-test measures and post-test measures. And ministers looked very, very carefully, not just at the road safety implications, and we gathered as much evidence as we could to inform that decision making, but also on young people's access to opportunity, be that jobs, be that education, be that whatever else. I know that's sometimes a difficult thing to rationalise, people's access to a job versus, the tragic stories of people who have lost their lives. But it is the fact that the statistics on young people not in education, employment or training are unfortunately not moving in the right direction at the moment, and access to opportunity and the impact on economic growth is a very important consideration. So I know not everyone in the seminar will agree with where we've come out on younger drivers, but I did want to explain that that's not accidental, and that was the product of some very, very careful thinking in government. Moving on then to older drivers. We have a consultation on introducing mandatory eyesight testing for older drivers. And that is something where there have been obviously very, very emotive calls for that, and certainly some very high profile collisions involving older drivers whose eyesight had really deteriorated to a very, very unsafe degree. That is something we want to move, hopefully, fairly quickly on. But we're also looking in slightly slower time at what opportunities there are to develop cognitive testing. Obviously, this happens already at DVLA, but trying to work out if there is a way to make it quicker, cheaper, easier to roll out some form of cognitive testing a bit more widely, because we recognise that there's a bunch of things going on as we all get older, and it isn't just eyesight testing. I'll only touch on a couple of other things just given time, but motorcyclists, we are consulting on a review of the entire training, testing and licensing regime, which is both complicated and I would say very ripe for review. There's a lot of really meaty policy in that consultation. So if you are interested in that sector, and I know a lot of people have very strong views about it, I really, really hope that you will digest that consultation and give us your thoughts. The only other one I will focus on this theme before moving on is safe driving or riding for work. And on this one, this is a non-legislative commitment, but it is a strong one. And that is ministers really want to develop a voluntary charter for those who employ others to drive as part of their job or to ride two-wheelers. We recognise there's some great practice going on with some companies, and we want to highlight that and use that to encourage some of those who perhaps aren't thinking in this space yet and should be. And also recognising that I believe the statistics show that the number of people, effectively professional drivers involved in collisions, on the face of it seems quite high. I think it's probably proportionate to the number of professional drivers on the roads at any given time. But there is obviously a question about whether we should demand or expect higher standards from people for whom driving or riding is their job. And also recognising sort of asymmetry here, that the casualties probably aren't the people who are driving or riding for work. And in urban centres, it's very often pedestrians and cyclists who are on the badly on the end of collisions caused by some of those professional vehicles. So we really, really want to look at that. Right, we'll move on to theme 2, which is technology, data and innovation. And this is really reflects a point of opportunity, I would say, in this country. We've got the World-Leading Autonomous Vehicles Act, which my colleagues in CCAV are working hard to implement. So we've got a big tech change coming. And we've also got all of the work with connected vehicles and new vehicle technologies such as ADAS. So there's a whole bunch of stuff changing here, and there's some real opportunities. And one of our headline measures is to we're consulting on it with a view to mandating a package of vehicle safety technologies in all new vehicles that are type approved in Great Britain. That derives from the EU GSR2 package, and so will bring Great Britain into alignment, not just with the EU, but also Northern Ireland. So it's really, really positive for the UK internal market, as well as road safety. And there's some really important safety measures here. From the analysis I've seen, we'd expect those to make a really, really positive difference. And many of you will know Mira Naran, who has campaigned so courageously on things like automatic emergency braking in memory for her son, Dev. There are many measures here. The other one that I want to pull out, which is really, really important, and the eagle-eyed amongst you will have long since spotted it, is the introduction of a road safety investigation branch. This has obviously been debated quite a lot over many years, and we've sort of moved around on it. But the strategy introduces a firm commitment to introduce a branch. But the key thing is it's going to be data-led. There are myriad brilliant sources of road safety data. Many of you will know a lot about this. I know Agilysis colleagues have spent, for a lot of professional time thinking about it. We are hoping that the new branch can bring together all of the different inputs and rationalise that data landscape and ensure that we are really, really making best use of it. And that digesting all that data, the branch will be able to make thematic recommendations to government and potentially other partners. So this doesn't mean physical inspections at the site of collisions. That will still be the purview of forensic collision investigators in the police, who are obviously very highly skilled in what they do. We're looking at making the most of. We want to make it easy for the police to record data in a format that we can use, and make sure that we are really, really making the most of all of that data, whether it's that's 19 or other things on top of that. So we've got a data discovery project underway at the moment to scope that out a bit more, and over the coming months, hopefully we will be able to say a bit more about that. Moving on then to my third theme, which is infrastructure. So this theme primarily is England only. And while there are dedicated new funding streams for road safety announced in this strategy, that reflects a big move actually across government in the way that we fund local authorities, and that is to have fewer grant funding streams, to consolidate it more. It very much is in line with the devolution agenda, giving local leaders access to larger, less sort of ring-fence pots of money where they can genuinely make local choices in line with their much deeper and closer knowledge of their local communities. So at city region level, we've got integrated settlements, and that is the sort of direction of travel probably for all local authorities in the medium term. But we are developing things like outcome frameworks for the mayoral strategic authorities, and trying to just make sure that where there are, rather than prescribe, you've got to spend this pot of money on this exact thing, and we'll pick, have a beauty contest to decide which road schemes we fund. Because so the outcomes, let's agree some outcomes that we all want to deliver, and then you decide how you get there. And then we have a hopefully not too onerous process for government and local government to come together to review that. And I wanted to say a bit about speed management. This is another area where ministers have taken the view that local leaders really have a better opportunity to get this right. But we really recognise that our guidance is rather out of date. And so we have commitment to produce new versions of both setting local speed limits and our guidance on setting up red light and safety cameras. And I know that that's a really important thing at local level. And our Minister Lillian Greenwood has said a lot of times, both publicly and in private, I think, that she's heard people say, it's outrageous, we can't put a speed camera up until somebody dies. That isn't really the correct interpretation of our guidance as we see it, but Lillian is committed to make absolutely clear, well, that is not what government intends at all. And so that refreshed guidance is something she'll be very, very interested in staying close to. Last theme then, robust enforcement to protect all road users. And our big kind of shiny measure here is the review of motoring offences. This is long overdue, actually. Most of our criminal justice framework around road offences is set out in the Road Traffic Act 1988 and the Road Traffic Offenders Act, and there are lots and lots of things in a very detailed consultation to focus on. But just to summarise very briefly, we're looking at drink and drug driving, seatbelt use and whether failure to wear a seatbelt should be endorsable, a big package around stop and report, and then there's a sort of fourth category which encompasses a lot of different things, including driving unlicensed and uninsured, and illegal number plates, sometimes called ghost plates. So there's a lot of really meaty stuff in there. And I should emphasise all of our consultations, there are 5 of them, they all close on the 11th of May. So there is still plenty of time to digest those and respond if you haven't already. Another thing here that I want to pull out is innovation in roads policing, because we know that changing the legal framework isn't the whole story. We still need the police and other enforcement agencies to make it happen on the roads. And I'm really proud to say we've had some great partnership working, particularly with the MPCC, but other partners over 3 or 4 years now through the Roads Policing Review. And we now have a Roads Policing Innovation Programme set up, which is sitting under Chief Constable Joe Shiner and is managed by Commander Kyle Gordon, who many of you will know. And that is doing some really exciting stuff, actually trialling different things, using data differently, and crucially, working to join things up across the 43 police forces in this country, which hasn't always been the case to date and is something just so powerful. And they're also doing brilliant things, linking up with the DVSA and the Motor Insurance Bureau and others. And I think that from what I'm hearing from the police, there's huge knock-on benefits through this. It improves road safety, but it actually helps them tackle a lot of other things like serious and organised crime and violence against women and girls. So there's a lot of really exciting work going on in that space. Lastly then, because I'm really keen that we get onto the panel discussion, we have a commitment in the strategy to establish a road safety board at national level. It will be chaired by Lillian Greenwood, and we will say a bit more, hopefully in the coming weeks, about exactly who the members will be. That is still under discussion, but the intention is that board will have strategic oversight of progress towards the national targets and will monitor both the targets and the SPIs that sit under them, and will be supported by an expert advisory panel. So can't say too much about all that now, but we are in the process of bottoming out all the fine details of that and should be able to say more hopefully quite soon. So I will close there and I'll stop sharing if I can work out how to do it. And then okay. We'll hand back to Dan.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. That's really helpful, a sort of overview of the strategy. And I think actually does lay a significant platform for what we want to discuss through the day, not least because 2 of your opening comments were around, we focus in the strategy on the things that only Westminster can do, but that partnership is really important and we are relying on our partners to help us get there. And so I think, what we want to explore through today is that how does the sense of how the strategy really does frame the ambition and help us to move forward, but what does it mean in terms of being able to translate that ambition into what we're going to do on the ground. And I wonder whether I could just throw that as a sort of first question back to you around the sort of, what does it mean to rely on others to help you get there? Obviously, you've talked about some of those things that are within the gift of the Westminster government, but the ambition means changes on the road. It means changes in local communities. It means changes to the way that people use our roads and interact. So what's your current sense of the need to generate a new and better way of working in partnership across the country?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Well, again, I should have said this in the presentation. I really recognise that a lot of local authorities and the Welsh and Scottish governments are kind of ahead of us on this, because they've had strategies and targets and ambition for years when the Westminster government hasn't really been stepping into that space. So we know there are lots of people who are, at the vanguard, who are leading, who do some brilliant stuff. So I really want to be, we are being respectful of that. It's not saying, ha ha ha, no, we'll do it and it'll all be different. So we want to kind of go with the flow of those that are doing brilliant stuff already, but hopefully incentivize those that might be thinking, ooh, where does this really sit on my priorities list? I've heard from some people at local authority level that national targets make a really big difference here. That if they are effectively competing for funding for a road safety scheme at local level against some other use of that money, if they can say, but government really cares about this, and delivering this thing here helps us deliver the government target, sometimes that makes the difference in choices at local authority level. And that's also borne out by some research that we've done, which show targets have quite a power of themselves, that even separated from the measures that you bring in to reduce them, just in terms of focusing minds and getting people on the same page and thinking, oh, right, this government's call, there's a call to action and we've got to get behind that. So I think there's real power in that, I've seen.
Great. Certainly there's the session after this is going to be one session this morning is going to be focusing a bit more on sort of the ambition and the targets. But I wonder if they can bring some of the other panelists in. Susie, if I come to you first, maybe. Obviously, what Kathy has outlined here are a lot of measures, 34 or so measures in the strategy overall, grouped under those 4 themes. And interested in whether you what you're seeing in that list of measures that will create genuine change, or what we actually might need to do above and beyond that, the sort of the sufficiency of those measures to address the ambition that's been outlined. What are your thoughts?
So if I have to pick a favourite child, of course it's going to be about speed, because speed is so important and critical in terms of both collision likelihood, but also very much so in terms of the severity of outcomes. So I'm really delighted to see the revision of setting local speed limits guidance on the list, and I think that could be really tremendously impactful. So I'd like to see, of course, that that guidance moving from being quite heavily focused on compliance and worrying about how fast people are going and only changing speed limits if they're quite close to that already. I'd like to see us move away from that and move towards setting speed limits according to the road function. What's the road for, and who does it need to support? Who's the vulnerable person in the loop on that road? So in terms of that guidance, I think that could be really, really impactful. Provided we move our functional speeds towards more survivable speeds. Now, I'm not talking about absolutes here. I'm talking about moving towards more survivable speeds, and the reason for that is because of it's very boring and technical. The relationship between fatality risk and speed is very much not very many people are killed, and then as you get faster, you get this sharp acceleration in fatality risk up this very steep part. So any sense in which you can move any of the speeds a little bit down so that you fall down the sharp bit means that a lot more people are going to survive. So that's why speed is so important. So even small changes have big impacts when it comes to speed. So that's my one sort of favourite child in the road safety strategy, if I'm allowed to pick one.
I think we're all allowed to. We're not allowed to say which our favourite child is, right? But no.
As my real children, no.
Ruth, if I come to you, sense from you. I mean, obviously you've got a huge amount of experience both in policing and now with the Road Safety Trust, looking at a wide range of measures. What do you see in here that gives you encouragement, and what do you think we might also need to attend to?
Dan, I'm really encouraged by the fact that we have got a strategic KPI. So, 65 by 35. And I am so impressed that we've got one around children, because too many children are dying or suffer serious injury on our roads. Having that strategic KPI that the government have said, this is our call to action, this is our KPI to save lives, gives permission, but also gives a dear impression that accountability needs to be at a local and regional level. My concern with that is that we've got a lot of change happening in the country at the same time as we're bringing in the road safety strategy. So we've got devolution and a new structure there. We've also got police reform coming in. So what I'm hoping to see is that we not only have the strategic KPIs, but we also understand how it fits into any new framework, so that on a local and regional footprint, we can set local targets, local ambitions, because we understand the risk locally on that local footprint, and then collectively that will feed into us all making progress. I mean, it's a really ambitious target, but it's saving lives, so let's go for it. And I think that will help. So I hope that answers the question. I think that top level target is so important.
Well, I wonder whether just ask a slight follow-up, because the way you phrased that was quite interesting. I think you said it creates the impression that there will be local or accountability at a local level. And at the moment, there is a national ambition, but we don't have an explicit local target, which we have had in the past. So
Yes.
the road safety strategy from 2000 to 2010, that accountability, that target cascaded to police forces and local authorities. Do you feel that we need to make that more explicit, or is the impression sufficient?
I think it needs to be very clearly detailed as to who on a local level is responsible. It's a joint accountability. It shouldn't be down to one organisation, whether it be health, the emergency services, or the local authority. It should be a joint responsibility feeding into the power of the Strategic Road Safety Partnership, which I am a strong believer of. Because working together, we achieve more. But it won't work if only one party is held accountable for that target. So everybody needs to know that they've got a part to play and will be held to account. To the communities, first of all. Why aren't you reducing road death and injuries in this community? But fundamentally feeding into the government ambition. And we know, if we look across the world, where there is success, and I'll pick Norway and Sweden, we have that accountability, and it feeds in. So we've got really good examples to look to. We can apply that to our infrastructure, our culture, and it does. I use the wrong word of impression, I think, thinking about it. I would like to see clear, detailed accountability, just like we've got for other areas of concern for the community. What's happening in a neighbourhood, what's happening in a street. There is clear targets there with clear accountability. And I think this strategy gives us the power and the opportunity to do the same around road safety.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ruth. Tanya, if I come to you, aware of much of the work that you've done working with subnational groups, partnerships on developing strategies. There's been frustration around the country for a while about the things that they haven't been able to attend to, the stuff that we need a Westminster government to do. Now, Kathy's outlined many things that the government have said they are going to do. What do you think that does for local partnerships in terms of saying, actually, there is now movement at government for the things that we need, but also what else do they need to be able to sort of do the job effectively?
Sure. I think actually how many of the policy measures are legislative says that we've finally got some leadership. We've looked at previous strategies or frameworks, and so much of them were driving the localism agenda and pushing road safety down. And I think it's so important to have, through these consultations and commitments, looking at what national government is the only organisation who can do these things. So I think that is a message alongside the targets, as both Ruth and Susie have said, are absolutely driving a message to the local road safety partnerships and authorities. I think to echo what Susie said actually about the the importance of speed, I think those pieces of guidance are also massively important for a local narrative perspective. It changes the story, doesn't it? When we're talking about people and place and the function of roads, we are selling road safety, we are communicating road safety in a different manner. And that should help so many of the partnerships that we work with, because there are still tensions at a local level about how important this topic is. And through such guidance, it will be absolutely setting out, now, this is the way forward, or this is what a safe system is and why it is so important for our communities.
Brilliant. One of the things I wanted to explore was kind of the speed with which we need to move, because the ambition in this strategy is obviously very significant. We're talking about around about 10% KSI saving per year in order to deliver on that ambition of 65% over 2035, because obviously you get it reduces year on year, even if you're doing the same percentage reduction. But there's quite a lot of consultation in here. And so some of these measures we're not likely to see coming into play for a little while. Kathy, sort of from you, first of all, obviously the consultations don't close till May. There will need to be parliamentary process to get that legislation through. Is there a sense at the moment from DFT about how soon some of this stuff will be on the statute book, and any sense of how soon it will therefore start to have an impact?
So you're right, Dan. It does take a while to get some of these measures through, and the ones we're talking about, a lot of them require primary legislation. So that's an act of Parliament. For those of you not super close to it, and that takes a long time, and rightly so, because it's really important that we spend the time drafting a bill before we put it to Parliament and make sure that we think we've got it right, and that it has proper scrutiny by democratically elected MPs. And I know the Lords isn't democratically elected, but the Lords do a really, really important job scrutinising legislation. There is absolutely massive interest in both houses of Parliament in this, but we do need to take the time to get it right. And, just taking motoring offences, we've got a consultation which has 40 questions on the implications of changing, a lot of offences, of penalties, of introducing some new measures. There's a lot to think through there. So my message is, kind of bear with us. As some of you will know, it is well-established practice that we don't comment on the forthcoming legislative programme until the King's Speech. So even if I knew what would be in the King's Speech, I couldn't possibly tell you before May. But basically, as you will know, usually the King sets out the legislative programme for a year at a time. There is, what I would say is that there's plenty of time left in this Parliament. And so we just need to make sure that we progress this policy. Yes, we want to crack on with it, but we take the time to get it right. The other thing I would say is there are some measures that can be done by secondary legislation. So that's through regulations, which is generally a lot quicker. And some headline ones in that space are the drink drive limit. For reasons I don't completely understand, it's the one measure in the motoring offences package that we can change through a statutory instrument. And so depending on the outcome of the consultation, and also thinking very hard about the rural hospitality sector, that is something that could be brought forward a bit quicker. And of course, the DSRT package is also secondary legislation.
It's good to understand the different requirements legislatively for each. I'm going to do a slight change in to our published programming, because Commander Carl Gordon is available on the line at the moment. It was going to be in a session a little bit later on, but isn't actually going to be able to be around for that. So I'm going to ask Kyla a question, if I may, which is around this whole piece about the motoring offences. And we've been talking, Kyle, about the sort of national ambition versus local capability, and thinking there's a lot going on in policing at the moment. A bunch of new road traffic legislation may be great from a road safety perspective, but what needs to happen in the policing family to be able to be sort of ready for that legislation when it arrives? If you're able to join us on that question.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks, colleagues, and apologies for interjecting myself at this time. It makes it sound like I'm just not available later. I'm chairing a national goal meeting in relation to an incident that most of you are cited on, so that is why I have the clash later on, and it just cannot be moved due to the number of people nationally that are attending that. So I do apologise. Thanks, Dan. So look, you're absolutely right. Having the legislation is one thing, operationalising it and ensuring that what we get out of it is the outcomes and the effects that we need is something entirely different. So what needs to happen? There's a number of things that need to happen, and actually many of them are already happening, which is the good news. And I'm not just saying this because Kathy's on the call, but of course the investment from DFT into National Police Chiefs Council's roads policing portfolio means that translating at the most strategic level of policing across the United Kingdom, across the 43 forces with Scotland and Northern Ireland actually taking much of the good practice from this. What we have is we have dedicated resource, capability and focus in a way that we have not had in the roads policing portfolio hitherto. So for those on the call that might not know, there was a complete step change in national roads policing 18 months ago whenever Operation Topaz, that strategic partnership between National Police Chiefs Council and Department for Transport commenced, and that has completely changed the way we are able to do business. Everybody always worked incredibly hard in the roads policing space. Everybody always tried to get things done, but on top of their day job, and yet many of the other portfolios in policing had ring-fence prioritised funding and resource to enable policing activity to be coordinated, to be tasked, to be for best practice to be captured, and we are now in that position as well. And actually, the funding around that, I think, is testament to just how serious and keen DFT and others are to make sure that this does translate into activity on the ground. Of course, I'm not saying for a second, and I'm stating the obvious, that roads policing and enforcement is how we make our roads safer. It isn't. It's a holistic approach. We talk about safe systems, and what we certainly don't want to do is arrive in some sort of a quasi-police state where actually people only comply because they're worried about what might be done to them if they don't. We would much prefer that everybody takes that personal responsibility. But to come back to your question, in its most straightforward form, I think what needs to be done is the work that's being done. We are now looking in National Police Chiefs Council. We've had a couple of dedicated sessions looking at the strategy, looking at our own roads policing strategy, looking at what a refresh might look like, and asking the question, what is it we need to do to play our part in delivering this element of this? And how would we do that in the complex police reform landscape? The fact that we are able to work around Operation Topaz and that dedicated resourcing means we are linked into National Police Chiefs Council right across all of the portfolios, Dan. So the first thing is we are plugged in at the highest levels in policing to ensure that we can deconflict that. The second thing is we're continually running operations and designing and evaluating operations on the back of that funding that's been given to us by DFT that enable us to ask the question, what can we do that has a cross-cutting capability? So it delivers local activity against risks that are seen in the community, but also has a roads policing and a road safety element to it. We did that, an example of that is the summer of action last year on the back of the Home Secretary writing to forces asking to make our streets safer. And we coined the phrase back then that part of safer streets is safer streets through safer roads. And we looked at what activity we could be doing on the road network through the legislation that we currently have and what might be coming down the line in order to make the road safer. So Dan, we will continue to do that. We push right out across the network that we have. We regularly run webinars and sessions with the 43 heads of roads policing units right across the country. We're linked in at every level that we need to be with the other MPCC portfolios. Kathy and others are sick of the sight of us because we're linked in that closely with DFT, and we're continually in those conversations. And actually some of the sessions that we'll be doing around things like enhanced drink and drug driving, nitrous oxide, ghost plates, all of that is work that is cited both to Kathy and others in DFT as well as Home Office officials. And actually what we're trying to do is we're trying to deconflict that point that you made, Dan, which is there's so much else going on in policing. It's possible for this to get lost. If there's anything specific I want to ask, do, but I want broad brush for those maybe on the call that aren't aware that we have been given this funding and we do now have this capacity.
That's great. Thanks, Carl, and appreciate in the midst of a very busy day, you taking time out to be with us. And I think that also addresses Chris Lewis's question in the Q&A. Please do keep your questions coming in. We are reviewing them. We'll try and get through as many of them as we can throughout the day, but it might be that they get fed in a little bit later as topics emerge. Before we draw this section to a close, I just wanted to go back to some of the other panelists, Ruth, Tanya, Susie. And one of the things that we touched on is the whole sort of accountability piece. At present, what the strategy describes is a national governance board. And we've touched a little bit on what might it mean to get accountability cascading effectively across the country. But just wondering on what your thoughts are around what will actually help to get that into local authority decision making. What more would they need to see, and or maybe what else might we need within the governance framework beyond a ministerial panel and an advisory group in order to ensure that there's appropriate engagement across the country? Who wants to go? Go on, Susie.
Can I just touch on one small area of this, and that's the leading versus lagging indicators, and it relates a little bit to that question you had earlier about timing. So you mentioned that the 65% reduction in KSIs sort of translates into 10% each year. Well, I think one of the challenges that we have is that unless we see 10% in the first year, if we don't see 10% in the first year, rather, we'll have to see more later. So every year that we don't hit 10%, the later years get more tricky. And one of the challenges in all of this sort of time framing is, well, the lagging indicators are we're going to catch up with them in 2027, 2028, potentially, and start to see if the measures really are sufficient and are getting us on the right track. So I have a little bit of a concern and worry about that, which is why I think having those leading indicators strengthened is a really critical thing. And the leading indicators are really at the heart of the safe system, aren't they? And measuring things that are really intrinsically important in terms of safe system delivery. Of course, I have to mention the IRAP indicator, which is mentioned in the strategy as having a look at whether we can apply that to major roads as well as strategic roads, because it's already applied on the National Highways Network and also on Welsh Government Network. That could then become really important in making sure we've got the levers to make sure that some of the more sort of, dare I say it, generic roads money is actually spent on road safety measures as well, because at the moment that's not included in some of those outcome frameworks that I've seen, at least, or I'm aware of. So I think there's some sort of tying together of the targets with the leading indicators that would match to the targets, and then things that we can monitor and really assess as we go along. And that's not just for roads, of course, it's for the whole piece that we need to have those leading indicators in place. So yeah, I don't know if that's helpful. And look, I'm looking forward to seeing the governance structure emerge. And one thing that I would note is that there are so many fantastic professionals. I mean, I don't know how many we're up to on this call already, but there are so many people that are just wanting to input and help and guide and provide information, evidence, trial things locally, all of that sort of stuff, and providing that broader framework below those two bodies that are already outlined would be great, because it would give people the opportunity to feed in and be part of this important, broad stakeholder base that needs to take this journey together.
Brilliant. I've been given permission by James to pinch a few extra minutes, so I'm going to run this conversation on just for a little bit longer, if I may. Tanya, interested in your reflections on this, because obviously you've been working, to help develop local strategies with around the country, often with very motivated local leaders who already have a high degree of ambition. And I'm just wondering, what you think this does for them in terms of strengthening that position and allowing them to lean on the national accountability framework to get what they need done.
Sure. I mean, it's actually quite tricky. With some of the conversations we're having at the moment is a lot of the partnerships have got their own strategies in place with different targets and different deadlines. So how they align to feed into this one is going to be something that they need to really consider. But I think you're right. It does empower them. I think it's what they will need is strong leadership and not kind of a devolving of responsibility down to these local strategies to deliver the national one. It's about how they can report their actions from a local level up, whilst knowing that that the government is taking responsibility and accountability for it. So I think it's actually quite a challenge to Kathy and colleagues about how these mechanisms, reporting mechanisms, communication mechanisms are put in place, because as Susie says, there are so many players in this sector who have got a contribution to make. And what we don't want to do is say, well, it's just government. Of course it isn't. And therefore, but it's not just locally or private sector. We have to all contribute to this. So I think there is, some communication networks that need to be built up to allow and to make sure that the local level is held accountable.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to go with a final question to Ruth, if I may. Ruth, one of the things that I think the Road Safety Trust has been brilliant at over the last decade that it's existed is helping to identify where there are gaps and build evidence in to fill those gaps. So just wondering whether there's anything that you see in the strategy that is a gap at the moment, and what you think we might be able to do or need to do to address any of those gaps if we're going to succeed in working together to achieve its ambitions.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word gaps. I think what the strategy for me has done is identified clear direction paths. So if I may quote what Kathy was saying about a review of legislation is long overdue. And I suppose within that there are some, since 1988, lots happened. The world of transport is multimodal, multifunctional. We've got different risks, and technology is moving quicker than we can ever catch up to. And that is a big challenge there. So identifying the right pathways and what we need to do, and then having those strong consultation links in so that the right people with the right knowledge and skills can feed in so that we know what is required over the next 10, 20 years, I think is key. So I suppose identifying and making sure we're getting the priorities right at the moment with what we know and what we anticipate is key. I think the gap for me is that detail around how this is going to work. So as an example would be, I like the idea of a national board, but I would like to see how different organisations across the sector who've got a big part to play can feed into it and then receive feedback back. I think that will be the strength, and it will also build up the legitimacy of that board going forward, because hopefully this isn't the first strategy that we're all engaged on, and this is a fantastic start. We all have a responsibility to take the power of this strategy forward, feed into it, and make it work for the future. So I'm not sure I've answered your question, Dan, but I do think as we look at these different elements, we've got to identify the right things with the right clarity to make it work, so that people can identify whoever they are, wherever their interest is. We all want to save lives, but they can identify themselves in there. And if they can identify themselves within the strategy, they're more likely to be engaged, contribute, and also challenged to get it right.
Whether there is an answer to my question or not, Ruth, it was a great summary of this session. So thanks for putting
Free to do that.
nice end note for us. And with that, can I just express my appreciation to Kathy, to Ruth, to Susie, to Tanya, and also for Cart for joining us. And I'm going to hand back to James.
Thank you very much, Dan. So we've overrun slightly. I suggest that we will invite Justin Ward and his panelists to join us for the next session. We'll start that at 10:05. So that gives anybody time for whatever you need to do. But do be back here ready to start the next session at 10:05. See you then.